There is one question that I absolutely love to ask everybody, and that is, if you could time travel to any era, which era would you time travel to? But to be quite honest, this isn't a simple question, is it? Because the answer depends entirely on your wealth, on your status, where you live, who you're surrounded by, because that would make your experience very, very different indeed. And there is no time that experience might be different and contrasting than at Christmas time.
The roots of Christmas in Britain stretch back long before tinsel, TV specials or Wham's Last Christmas. Pagan Yule fires, medieval feasts, a brief ban on the festivities. The season has twisted and transformed for centuries. In today's video, we're stepping into the Christmases lived between the 1820s and the 1950s. A period shaped by faith, industry, class, community, war, and the rise of modern comfort. Of course, no two families have ever celebrated the season in the same way. Even now we all do it differently, from the timing of Christmas dinner to the traditions we treasure. But if future historians looked back at a 21st century British Christmas, I think they'd probably still spot the similarities. A sparkling tree, the roast dinner, and the supermarket queue wrapped around the car park. Christmas is always changing. Just this year, a survey found that 59% of people in Britain no longer see Christmas pudding as essential on the big day. Traditions rise, they fall and they reinvent themselves. But the heart of Christmas, whatever it means to each of us, always endures. So, if like me, you're a little bit nosy and you love the idea of peeking inside other people's Christmases across different eras, then my friends, this is the video for you.
Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Claire and this is the Wanderlust way. First off, let me say a huge thank you to everybody that supports this channel by liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, becoming members, sending super thanks, sending donations. Honestly, everything that you do is helping this channel to grow. It's allowing me to continue making videos like this and sharing the places and the stories that I find with you. So today is one of the Christmas specials and it is going to be pretty special because we are not doing anything normal. We're going time travelling and we're going to look through windows of the Christmases past. So when I decided to make this video at the beginning of the year, I thought the best place to do this is going to be the North Living Museum, which of course, if you don't know, is Beamish here in County Durham. Now it's a fully immersive historical experience, so we're going to be time travelling from the 1820s right through to the 1950s to see what Christmas was like through the eyes of ordinary people during those times. It's going to be quite magical, I think. So if you're ready for a cosy Christmas nostalgic time travelling adventure, then pull up a chair, maybe grab yourself a warm drink. That's enough waffle, let's wander. When one decides to embark on a time travelling adventure, I think you will agree that the best place to start is usually the start. So that's what we're going to do first. We're going right back to the early 1800s to Pockley Old Hall, which is the oldest part of Beamish. And here I'm expecting that Christmas is going to be sort of with the rhythm of the land. Life here, it's a farm, it was simple, it was rural, but no doubt it would have been meaningful in its own little way as well. So let's get in our time machines and do this first.
Christmas in the 1820s wasn't about glitter or spectacle. It was about getting through winter with what you had and making the best of it. Out here in rural Britain, homes like Pockley Old Hall were the backbone of everyday life. Simple stone walls, tiny windows, and one open fire doing the work of central heating, cooker, boiler and light bulb all in one. That single hearth was the heart of each home, and everybody depended upon it. Beds were shared for warmth, floors were hard packed, and the cold crept in no matter how many blankets you piled on. One Durham diary from the 1820s describes the winter air as sharp enough to wake you from your sleep. and you can imagine exactly what that felt like in a house like this. Most of a family's income went on basic food, and Christmas dinner wasn't an escape from that reality. It perhaps looked something like this: a piece of salted pork or mutton, boiled carrots and turnips, bread baked days before, and if you were lucky, a suet pudding with a few dried fruits scattered through. Turkey? No, that was a luxury for the wealthy. Most rural families wouldn't see one on their table for decades. I think there's something beautifully simple about the 1800s Christmas. From what I can tell, it's very just back to basics, but that makes it feel quite peaceful as well. So yeah, maybe over time, as we've got a little bit more oomph about Christmas, we might have lost a little bit of that simplicity. I don't know. What does everybody think? What do you think about the 1800s? How does it feel? The 1800s show us that even in a world where money was tight and winter was unforgiving, people still found ways to mark the season. The Yule log was a big moment, dragged into the house with effort and a bit of ceremony, meant to burn slowly through the festive days. Holly and ivy were brought indoors, not just to look pretty, but because evergreens symbolised life continuing even in the darkest part of the year. Children didn't unwrap piles of presents. If they did receive a gift at all, it was perhaps practical. A new apron, knitted mittens if they were lucky, maybe a wooden toy crafted by a family member if they were particularly creative. But what really made Christmas feel special were the gatherings. Across the northeast, mumming plays and sword dances were still going strong, folk traditions dating back centuries. Neighbours would crowd into warm rooms for songs, stories and a bit of mischief. And church services pulled whole communities together, often after long walks in the dark with only a lantern for light. It was a hard life, there's no point romanticising it. But there's something undeniably touching in how people created moments of warmth and meaning with so little. This was Christmas before commercialism, before Victorian reinvention, before the postcard perfect images we know today. Just a family, a fire, and the small rituals that made winter feel a little less long.
As we leave the 1800s, the 1820s behind us now, this simple rural Christmas, we're now going to jump forward in our time machine by just under 100 years, about 80 years, to the 1900s to see Britain in the Edwardian time. Now, I'm expecting things are going to be busier, they're going to be brighter, because obviously not only is it a town, but the world has changed, Britain has changed at this point. So let's time travel. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are here in the 1900s town. So we've stepped forward around 80 years from the simplicity of the pockly old hall. And here we are in the hustle and the bustle. Christmas is really in the windows and everything here. So let's see what life was like in the 1900s Edwardian town.
Christmas in the early 1900s was a world transformed. Victorian Britain had already embraced festive shopping streets and decorated windows, but by the Edwardian era, those displays became bigger, brighter and far more elaborate. In towns like this, bakeries offered mince pies and cherry loaves. Sweet shops filled their jars with humbugs and peppermint creams, and the co-op stacked tins of biscuits and seasonal treats that would have felt wildly indulgent to families living just a century earlier. Children pressed their noses to the glass, staring at dolls' prams, tin soldiers, wooden train sets, the kind of toys that were becoming more accessible as wages slowly improved and mass production grew. Christmas cards, they were a national obsession, and by the 1910s, tens of millions were posted each year. They were often pretty, sentimental, perhaps featuring snow scenes, robins, children in their Sunday best. Father Christmas postcards, they were all part of a growing national tradition of sending greetings through the post. Christmas trees too were now standard in many homes, and crackers, with their tiny trinkets, paper hats and terrible jokes, they were also an essential part of the festivities. For families with steady incomes, this was the first era when Christmas began to sparkle. Not in a flashy, commercialised way, because that's going to come later, but in a let's make it magical for the children kind of way. But life wasn't easy for everyone. Many Edwardian workers, the shop assistants, the mill hands, railway men and especially the domestic servants, they worked long, exhausting hours right through December. For servants in particular, the lead up to Christmas was one of the busiest times of the entire year. Polishing, cooking, preparing, serving, often from dawn until late at night. And, while Christmas Day was usually a day guaranteed off, it wasn't a holiday in the modern sense. It was a brief pause before the routine just began again. And in a world like that, community mattered enormously. Schools held nativity plays, chapels hosted concerts, bands played in the street, and neighbours looked out for one another, especially during the coldest weeks of winter. This was Christmas in a world on the brink of huge change, technological, social, and cultural. A season beginning to look, sound, and feel a little more like the one we might know today.
Now this I think is Christmas.
In a town like this, Christmas wasn't only shaped by shop windows, it was shaped by the rhythm of everyday life, where people worked, where they gathered, and where they snatched a little joy whenever they could. Take the bank, nothing fancy, just a quiet, solid place where small hopes were tucked away. Christmas clubs and savings books meant that a few pennies put aside in July could become a tin of biscuits, a toy for the children, or something special for the table come December. Little moments of magic made possible by a year of steady hands and tighter belts. Then there was the pub, always warm, always welcoming. You can almost imagine the sound of boots on the doorstep or the glow of the fire, the hum of conversation drifting through the room at Christmas time. It was where stories were shared, songs were sung, and neighbours shook off the cold for a while. Not extravagance, just togetherness, the sort of comfort that never really goes out of fashion. And of course the fairground, bright colours against a winter sky, the music from the organ weaving through the cold air, painted horses rising and falling like a heartbeat. Travelling showmen brought their rides to towns throughout the year, but in winter they felt different, a little wilder, a little more magical, a moment of colour and excitement in the darkest stretch of the season. Together, the bank, the pub, the fairground, they show us an Edwardian Christmas built on small joys, shared moments, and the kind of simple pleasures that still feel familiar today.
We're not actually going to jump back into our time machine for this one, but we are going to go on a little walk, and it's brought us here, still in the 1900s, but to a very contrasting world, because this is the life of the pit village. Now, in the 1900s, thousands of families lived and worked in communities like this across the northeast, and it's a very different contrast to the glitz and the glam of the town life that we've previously seen, because here life was ruled by the rhythm of coal, long hours, but a really strong sense of community spirit. So let's have a little wander around and see what Christmas looks like through the eyes of the mining families.
Life in a mining village moved to a very different rhythm. Early mornings, late nights, and the constant presence of the pit shaping every day of the year. These cottages may look small, but they carry the weight of real stories. They originally stood in Hetton Le Hole, built in the early 1860s, And when they were moved to Beamish in the 1970s, they were rebuilt stone by stone. Every doorway, every flagstone returned exactly to where it once belonged. A whole street lifted from the past and reassembled like a memory. Behind each cottage, long gardens stretch out like narrow lifelines. Families planted leeks, turnips, carrots, winter cabbages, whatever they could coax from the soil. These gardens fed them through the coldest months, and more often than not, they shaped the Christmas dinner too. Inside, the rooms were small but full of life. Parents, children, grandparents, sometimes a lodger tucked away into a boxy little room so the family could earn a few extra pennies. 6, 8, sometimes more, all sharing the same few rooms and the same glowing heart of the home, the fire. Just like the farmhouse we saw back in the 1820s, the fire wasn't just for warmth, it was the centre of everything, a gathering place, a comfort, a practical place to cook food. The fire was a steady beat in the background of daily life. And if you think about it, that instinct goes right back to the Stone Age, long before Christmas even existed. Even today, in modern Christmas scenes, we still gather around the fireplace, decorated with garlands and stockings. And it's funny how some traditions never really change, even when we don't realise that we're keeping them.
So let me know in the comments, does your Christmas at any point revolve sitting around a fire, whether that be a real one, a log burner, a electric fire, or maybe even one that you've put on YouTube on your TV as a bit of a background? Let me know in the comments.
Christmas decorations here were simple but meaningful. Holly from a hedgerow, paper chains made in the schoolroom, maybe a candle if there was spare money. The glow of the fire did most of the decorating. And the Christmas dinner? Well, it depended entirely on the year. Sometimes a small joint of beef or mutton, but often whatever the garden and the wages would allow. Root vegetables, homemade bread, perhaps something sweet from the co-op if somebody could spare the coins. It wasn't a feast, but it was theirs.
Here at Beamish, a visitor can experience something that meant more to the families in the pit villages of the North East than you might possibly imagine, and that is, of course, fish and chips.
Across the North East, fish and chips were a true working class staple. Cheap, hot, filling, and cooked in rich beef dripping. That gave northern chippies their unmistakable flavour. Fish arrived by rail at low cost, potatoes came from local fields, and a few pennies could feed a family on a cold December night. For parents coming home from long shifts and children with cold fingers and red faces, a shared paper parcel of hot chips felt like a small piece of Christmas magic.
So if you do come to Beamish, I can recommend these chips. They cook them in beef dripping, which is a traditional way. Nice, dude. Now, when you get to past the cottages and you get more towards the church and the school, you can really sort of feel the community sense of the 1900s pit village, and I think that's possibly what their Christmas was more about than anything else.
As we make our way through the village, you start to sense how much these places meant to the families who lived here. The school was of course never full every day. Some children were kept at home to help, others were already out working long before their time. But for those little feet who did step through the door in December, Christmas meant simple joys. Handmade decorations, paper chains brightening the classroom, and learning the words to carols and hymns that they would later sing in the chapel. And the chapel really was the heart of so many communities, a place of stillness after long shifts, a gathering point for baptisms, weddings, and those Sunday services where neighbours sat shoulder to shoulder, warming the room with their voices long before the fire ever did. Music played its part too, and though I can't show you much of that today, Colliery bands were woven into the rhythm of mining life. They played at local events, marched on gala days, and brought comfort when tragedy cast its shadow. But at Christmas time, their carols drifting across the village were a reminder that joy could still be found, even in the harshest seasons. More than anything, Christmas here was about togetherness. Not presents or feasts, but community. Children singing, families gathering in the chapel, and neighbours offering warmth and kindness when the world outside felt cold and unforgiving. In places like this, Christmas was not measured by what you had, but by who you had beside you.
We are now putting the 1900s behind us. We're jumping back in our time machine. This time we're not going far, we're going to 40 years ahead to the 1940s. Now obviously at this point Britain is in wartime, so life is going to look a little bit different. So we're going to see some changes, but also we're going to see how war has impacted Christmas for these people. Now we're still in a rural setting, so it's going to be farmland sort of setting again, so that'll be interesting to compare. The last time I came to Beamish, funnily enough, it was at Christmas time as well, and I brought my mum up here with me. Now, when we got here to the 1940s farm, she got really nostalgic, and she told me that this reminded her of her own grandparents' house. And that made me think really, because this time travelling we're doing today and these Christmases that we are seeing, they're not that long ago. The history isn't ancient, and it makes it realise how Christmas has developed over such a short period of time. So if you notice anything that you see in the video today that brings back any nostalgia of Christmases of the past for you, then feel free to obviously let me know in the comments.
A 1940s farmhouse at Christmas feels different from every era we've visited so far, because the world outside these walls was at war. From 1939 to 1945, Britain lived under blackout, rationing, and the constant uncertainty of letters arriving from far away. Yet on farms like this, people worked hard to keep the season alive in whatever way they could. In the countryside, the war touched every household differently. Many men, including the farm hands while they were away fighting, conscripted as soon as they turned 18. The farmer, however, they were majority still here, working the land, because agriculture was classed as essential work. But no matter who was missing, the work never stopped. Women helped run the farms, teenagers took on jobs far beyond their years, evacuees, the children sent from the cities for safety, they'd learned new routines and they helped wherever they could. The Women's Land Army, they played a huge role at this time, working shoulder to shoulder with farming families, their green jumpers and brown breeches becoming a familiar sight across the countryside. Inside the farmhouse, the kitchen, it was the heart of it all. The range simmering away, a kettle gently rattling on the boil, recipes stretched and reshaped to fit the ration books. Butter, sugar, meat, all tightly controlled, so Christmas dinner became an act of imagination. Potato pie instead of turkey, perhaps even a rabbit if they could catch one. Carrot biscuits instead of shortbread, pudding sweetened with beetroot to make up for the lack of sugar, every scrap saved, every ingredient stretched, the kind of wartime alchemy that turned not enough into just enough. And gifts were no different. They were made, mended, repurposed. Knitted socks from leftover wool, toys carved from scrapped wood, dolls sewn from old dresses, wrapping paper carefully folded away to be used again next year. It wasn't about extravagance, it was about effort, love made visible in the simplest of ways.
Now, I could talk all day about the lessons that I've learnt my own from this time period, but one in particular takes me back to my own childhood when we'd be sat around, we'd be opening our presents on Christmas Day morning, and my grandfather, he was obviously around during World War II, he fought in World War II, and he would go around rummage through all the paper on the floor, and he'd pick it all out, and he'd carefully sit there with his cup of tea usually with a whiskey in it on Christmas morning, and he'd peel off all the sellotape, and then he'd carefully fold all the wrapping paper back together. And I remember at the time thinking, that's a bit weird. And now when I look back, I feel really ignorant and stupid, because that was such a powerful moment.
Blackout curtains pulled tight over windows, no streetlights, no welcoming glow on the lane, just the deep quiet of rural darkness, broken only by the sound of boots on the path or the low rumble of an aircraft passing overhead. Yet even in those years, people found ways to make Christmas feel like Christmas. Neighbours shared ration coupons to help one another put a meal together. Farmers traded what they had so no family would go without. Evacuees were included in the celebrations as though they had always belonged. And in homes like this, the wireless became a lifeline. Carols drifting through the static, news from the front, messages of resilience. The King's speech echoing across rooms quietly decorated with holly and hope. These wartime Christmases were difficult, but they carried a very special message, that joy could still exist even when times were hard. And that's why this era is often remembered as the Christmas of hope, a reminder of what people were holding on for: home, family, and the promise of peace.
We are now getting back in our time travelling machine, and for the very last time we're going to a promising new era, because we are leaving wartime Britain behind us and we're jumping into the 1950s, to the bright lights of Christmas, just 10 years ahead of where we are now, which I think there's going to be quite a contrast. So let's have a look. Let me know in the comments though whether you think the 1940s Christmas was still meaningful. Obviously it was very hard, and if there's anything you think we can take from 1940s and bring into our modern day Christmas. We have now gone back into our time machine, and we've gone 10 years to the 1950s town. Now, this is one of the latest additions to Beamish. It came here, I think it opened in about 2023, but it's the first time I've actually been and explored it. So I'm very, very excited to show you. And already it feels like there's a completely different vibe here to the 1940s. Obviously, there's no more war, is there? So there's lots more colour, there's lots more food and drink and toys available to make Christmas even a little bit more magical.
Stepping into the 1950s town feels like stepping into a Britain that was finally beginning to exhale. The war was over, rationing was easing, and homes across the country were finding their feet again. For the first time in years, Christmas could be a little brighter, a little sweeter, and a little more about enjoyment than pure survival. Television sets were starting to appear in living rooms, heavy, boxy things with tiny screens, but filled with a sense of magic. Families gathered close to watch the first Christmas broadcasts, the glow of the screen replacing the fireside in many homes. It was the beginning of a brand new tradition, Christmas around the telly. And if the 1940s were defined by making do, the 1950s were defined by looking forward. Shops brimmed with colour and choice again, fancy biscuits, tinned fruit, real sweets, a return to the simple luxuries that had once felt unimaginable. And then of course, there was the toy shop, shelves stacked with clockwork cars, cuddly toys, board games, Meccano sets, skipping ropes, the kind of treasures that children had dreamed of through the long wartime years. Christmas morning must have felt different now, brighter, louder, full of the excitement that only new beginnings can bring.
This new decade, community spaces really took on a whole new lease of life.
The cinema and the record shops, they brought Christmas films, newsreels, music, the kind of warm escapism people had been craving. Couples, families, friends all gathering for a shared moment of wonder. And the community centre, that was the heart of things. Christmas dances, socials, children's parties, cups of tea, laughter, and that feeling that after everything Britain had endured, people were ready to celebrate again. Even the hairdressers and the dressmakers became part of the season. 1950s curls, lacquered waves, bows and ribbons, getting glammed up for the Christmas do became a tradition all of its own. This was a decade learning to feel hopeful again, and you can sense it in every corner of this street. By the mid-1950s, Christmas in Britain looks to feel familiar again, not just in the shops but around the dining table. After years of rationing, certain foods finally returned to Christmas dinner. Real butter, sugar without coupons, proper puddings that didn't rely on carrots or clever substitutions. Tinned fruit, a real luxury, was brought out for the special day. And bright foil-wrapped sweets appeared in stockings in a way they simply hadn't for an entire generation. For many families, this was the first Christmas in years where they could afford small indulgences. Turkish delight, jelly babies, boxes of chocolates shared slowly over the season. Children who'd grown up on wartime shortages must have felt as though the world had suddenly burst into colour. But if there was one thing the 1950s excelled at, it was games. Christmas afternoon meant gathering in the living room, adults in their best clothes, children fizzing with excitement, and out came the parlour games. Charades, beetle drive, pass the parcel made with layer upon layer of mismatched paper, musical chairs in the hallway if the weather was bad, blind man's buff if someone had too much energy, and of course the wonderful chaos of the 1950s board games boom. Snakes and ladders, Ludo, drafts and sets of dominoes worn smooth from use. And for families who were lucky enough to have a television, that became part of the ritual too. Christmas specials, variety shows, the Queen's speech, and the warm glow of a tiny black and white screen filling the room with shared excitement. It was a decade discovering joy again, slowly, carefully, one treat, one toy, one game at a time. Leaving behind the bright lights, the shop fronts and the modern buzz of the 1950s town, the walk out to the farmhouse feels like stepping into a different rhythm of life entirely. Because even in the same decade, Christmas could look and feel completely different depending on where you lived. And out here in the countryside, the pace is slower, the traditions are older, and the season still pulls its meaning from the land itself.
As we've left the bright lights and the colour of the 1950s town, we now go back to a more simpler time, but we're not time travelling. We're just walking over to the 1950s farm. Now, obviously, town life and country life was very, very different then. And to be quite honest, I think it's still very, very different now, whether you live in a city and a town compared to whether you live in the countryside. So let me know in the comments whether you agree with that, and let me know, are you a town mouse or are you a country mouse? What do you actually prefer?
Inside a 1950s farmhouse, Christmas was still wonderfully simple. Bread rising on the kitchen table, a pot gently steaming on the range, the smell of pine, polish and slow-cooked winter food. Even as the modern world crept forward with televisions, new appliances and shelves full of colour, rural life held onto traditions that had been passed down for generations. Out here, Christmas was not about abundance, it was about familiarity. Many families raised their own festive bird, a chicken, a duck, sometimes even a goose, if the year had been kind. Vegetables came from the garden, sprouts touched by frost, potatoes stored since autumn, carrots pulled fresh from the soil. It wasn't extravagant, but it was honest, homegrown and made with love. Desserts were simple too, a fruit cake, a trifle, or custard poured thick over a pudding that had been steamed slowly on the stove, and tucked inside stockings, well, a treasured satsuma or a handful of sweets, small luxuries that meant far more than their size would suggest. Decorations were still usually handmade. Paper chains looped across wooden beams, holly tucked behind picture frames, a small tree brought in from the hedgerows and decorated with whatever the family had saved from last year. And the gifts, those had a character all of their own. Sometimes they were simple treats, a tin of toffee, a little bottle of scent, or a packet of coloured pencils that felt almost too nice to open. Other times they reflected the shift towards a more modern world making its way into rural life. A glossy magazine, a patterned headscarf, a new comic, or a small kitchen gadget that promised to make things just a little easier. And for the children, nothing beat the excitement of something with moving parts. A wind-up car, a skipping rope, or a wooden farm ready to take over the kitchen table on Boxing Day. Community mattered just as much as it had for generations. Neighbours popping in for a cup of tea, children running between farmyards, the radio crackling with carols and Christmas specials, and families gathering around the table to share what they had. It was a quieter kind of Christmas, but one filled with the kind of warmth that doesn't depend on bright lights or a full shop window. A Christmas grounded in the land, in routine, and in the quiet hope that comes at the end of a long year.
And so after travelling for nearly a century of Christmases, we've been from the simple farmhouses to the hustle and bustle of the 1900s town. We've obviously compared the pit village to the town life, the country life, 1940s, the wartime, and then obviously the hustle and bustle, the lights and the colour of the 1950s. So that leaves me with just one question. What do all these Christmases tell us about our own? What do you think? Let me know in the comments.
If there's one thing our journey today has shown, it's that Christmas has never looked the same for everyone. It has been simple and it has been grand. It has been noisy and it has been quiet. It has lived in farm kitchens warmed by a single fire, in coal villages held together by community, in polished Edwardian shop fronts, in wartime homes lit by courage, and in the bright new optimism of the 1950s. Every era we've stepped into held its own version of the season, shaped by circumstance, by the world outside, and by the people doing their best to create a moment of warmth with whatever they had. And maybe that's the real heart of it. Christmas isn't defined by how many people are around us, or how picture perfect things look, or whether the year has been easy or difficult. It's about the small moments that bring comfort, a favourite film, a quiet walk, a message from someone who cares, a memory that makes you smile, or simply taking a breath and letting yourself rest. Because Christmas has always been a tapestry of different experiences, and every single one is valid. So wherever you are watching from, and whatever this season looks like for you, busy or quiet, joyful or gentle, you are part of this bigger story too. A story of finding light in dark places, a story of hope that carries through every era, a story written in homes just like these, and in homes just like yours.
And so that is it. Our time travelling adventure has got to come to a close. As much as it would be nice to perhaps stay in one of these eras for a little bit longer, we have to return to our own time. So thank you to everybody for watching. Let me know which has been your favourite era to see. Let me know if it sparked any nostalgic memories for you. A big thank you to Beamish for giving me permission to film this video for you guys. It really means a lot that I can share the history with you, especially at Christmas time when it seems even more magical than usual. So thank you everybody. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you on the next adventure.